We hope/assume hiring managers are going to spend more time than they do. But there have been 2 studies done on this, one in 2012 and then again in 2018. And they found that on average, employers are spending less than 10 seconds reviewing a resume before deciding whether or not to toss it. You have less than 10 seconds to make the right impression and get into that pile for further consideration. There are a lot of different formats out there, but the one that is most popular, and because it seems to be the most effective for the largest number of professionals, is what's known as a combination or a hybrid resume. And what this basically means is that before you just launch into your career history, you try and set the stage. The top third of that resume is really setting the tone. Think of it as the elevator pitch to the rest of your resume. It's a summary with a professional title that's explaining what you're great at and qualified to do, all with a specific job goal in mind. And once you've given them that high-level information, then you're proving that you possess these skills and this experience by detailing that in your work experience and your education and professional training. How you present your information is just as important as the information you present. So if content is king, then design is most certainly queen when it comes to that resume. Less is more. And I know for a lot of people, they want something that's going to grab the recruiter's attention, but I caution you to not go too far out there because recruiters and hiring managers are accustomed to looking for information in certain spots. They're quickly scanning your resume to determine if you are a good fit before they move on to the next application. There are definitely some exceptions, but most professionals should be using a 2-page resume. There was actually a study done in 2018 that found that employers prefer a 2-page resume over a 1-page resume, regardless of a candidate's level. Because they spend a short period of time looking at your resume, you truly don't want it longer than 2 pages, unless you're applying for a very specific type of role where a longer resume is required. The average resume is 1 straight column all the way down. It starts with the information, it goes basically straight down. We are now starting to see formats where there is a left-hand rail or a left-hand column that's skinnier than kind of the main section. And we found that format is great because it's different. It catches the recruiter's eye, but most importantly, it also renders well when you're submitting your resume through an applicant tracking system. If you ever see a resume format or template online where they're giving you a right-hand rail or a skinny right-hand column to fill out with information, avoid it at all costs. For whatever reason, applicant tracking systems cannot read that right-hand column effectively, and it's going to get your information all scrambled. You don't want these endless lists of bullet points or these really dense paragraphs of text, because frankly, that's hard to read quickly. So keep in mind that you want to use bullet points really strategically to draw the reader's eye to the most important details, your accomplishments, your most important qualifications. You want to make sure you're using a font that is not too small. I really wouldn't go below size 10, 10 and a half, and that's on the small end. And then typically up to 11, possibly 12, depending on what font you use. You want to use a font that's not custom. You don't know what system the reader will be reading your resume on, so you don't want to pick something that might come out all garbled on their end. So stick to the standard ones. You just want to make sure that it renders well, both on a digital device as well as if someone printed it out. If you are going to include color, just be very cognizant of what colors you're using. I would not go with more than 1, maybe 2 accent colors max, because you want the bulk of your content to still be in a black font that's very easy to read against a white background. You want to start with your contact information, which is your full name, and the same way it's going to appear on your LinkedIn profile, business cards, anything related to your job search. Keep your name consistent. You want 1 email address. Again, remember, it's part of your branding, so make sure it's professional looking. You want to include 1 phone number, preferably your cell phone, so that you control what the voicemail sounds like, who picks up that phone and when. Any relevant social media handles. If you have a career that lends itself to having either a blog that you're maintaining to show your writing ability, or perhaps an online portfolio that's a visual representation of your work, by all means include that information. And that all goes at the top. Then you want to move on and have a professional title. And the professional title should be a description of whatever you're pursuing next. Your professional summary is typically 3 to 5 lines that are explaining or summarizing how many years of experience in what types of industries or functions, and more importantly, how have you leveraged these skills, this experience, in order to produce results or benefit previous employers. You want to have something called areas of expertise. Sometimes it's called core competencies, sometimes it's called key skills. They all mean the same thing. It's give me a list of keywords that describe kind of the breadth of your knowledge with a certain job goal in mind. Then when we're talking about work experience, typically we are then starting with your most recent job and working our way backwards. You're typically not going beyond that 15-year time frame. While you may have done some really cool things 20 years ago, employers care about what have you done most recently that's related to what you're applying for today. When it comes to each job, there are certain pieces of information that you always want to include. The company name, a short blurb that describes what you were responsible for, and then I typically save the bullet points as bragging points. So after I've done a short blurb that describes this is what I was responsible for in this position, here's what I accomplished as a result. Use the bullet points as bragging points. Did you increase revenue, cut costs, improve customer experience, make job seekers happier? Whatever you did that's better, faster, benefited, added value to the company, that's what you're emphasizing there. If you have a role where it's really hard to put numbers against what you did, just think in terms of better, faster, quicker, more money, less cost, those sorts of things. Just describe it. If you have one of those roles where you say, I was a tasker, man, I didn't have massive qualifications. It was my first job out of school. There's not a lot I can put. In those instances, I always say, well, think about what doesn't get done if you missed a couple days of work. What balls get dropped? How can you prove that you were good at what you did? If it was a seasonal job, were you asked back for multiple seasons? Did you get Employee of the Month? Were you asked to train or mentor new hires? If you were working in a restaurant, did you get the best shifts? Whatever you can use to describe how you were good at your job is what the readers truly care about when they're reading your resume. When it comes to education, you're really putting down the institution, the degree or certification you obtained, the year you got it, perhaps the location of the institution. Not much more than that. If you're a recent college graduate, you're going to have your education towards the top of your resume. But for everybody else, the education typically falls to the very end of your document. If you speak other languages, you're going to want to make a mention of it towards the end of your professional summary. And then you may also include that at the end of your resume document. And then the last component that is also optional and only if it makes sense, you can put in professional associations. And there's also a question about hobbies. When it comes to hobbies, if you're going to put hobbies on your resume, make sure that they're unique or that they help to demonstrate that you possess a certain skill set that's important for the job you're doing. So for instance, I always say if it wouldn't pass the dating profile test, I like traveling, I like to read, I like to cook. Don't include that stuff on your resume either. Only something that's going to make you stand out that might actually be a really good icebreaker when you're speaking with somebody at the company who's interviewing you. It's hard to be objective when you're writing your own resume. I wouldn't write my own resume, and I've been doing other people's resumes for years because it is hard to be objective. You get personally attached to certain pieces of information, whether or not they're truly relevant to what you're pursuing next. And so I think it's always important to get an objective opinion. Send your resume to somebody, ask them what they think. Of course, you can do friends and family. If you know somebody in the industry, by all means, everyone's going to have a different opinion. It is important to at least get that initial check to make sure you're going in the right direction. I do recommend getting that gut check before you start sending it out to all these jobs that you're truly interested in.